Well, guys, it happened. Texas A&M has their man. Mark Stoops will take over as head coach of the Aggies in 2024. Or so we thought. Just crazy, crazy turn of events. We thought it was Mark Stoops. Nope. Mike Elko takes over as the head coach, succeeding Jimbo Fisher, the head coach he previously was defensive coordinator for here at Texas A&M. You guys know. Has there been a more insane 24-hour news cycle in Aggie football in recent memory? I can't think of a more polarizing situation where on one end of the spectrum, we were outraged pretty much unanimously with the initial hiring of Mark Stoops. I would say 85% of Aggies were strongly against his name entering the hat in the first place, and then even worse when it was announced that he would be hired. The next day, after that was put to bed and didn't happen, Mike Elko, he's the head coach. So is it relief? Is it joy? Is it both? I don't know, but it seems like a vast majority of Aggies are happy with this hire. How do you feel about this hire? It's Mike Elko. It's the name that's been circling this program pretty much ever since he left and was accelerated once the program started going downhill in 2022. It was a name that really never went away when you were talking about who could potentially take over for Jimbo if things went south. It was a name that was just there. Mike Elko, Duke. He will eventually look to move up, especially if he continues to be successful at his current spot. And he was successful at Duke. But the way it went down, man, just crazy. So let's back up. Saturday morning, we got the article from Billy Lucci, the coaching update, talking about the names that were in the hat. Ryan Day, still not that serious of a contender. The other names that are consistently there, they were always there. Jeff Traylor, Kalen DeBoer, Jed Fish, Mike Elko. And then in that article, all of a sudden, Mark Stoops, out of nowhere. And then it turns out he was the one that got hired that evening. So I don't know if it was the fact that it was just there and all of a sudden he was the guy. He didn't have a chance to think about it. It's not a sexy hire. It's a pretty boring hire, a pretty established guy. Not old, but, he's been around and we know what he is. And it just did not sit well. It was just not the move. So I really don't know what happened. And when the inevitable documentary comes out, that's when we're going to know exactly how this thing went down. Some say Ross Bjork jumped the gun and went for the hire without approval of the board. Others say that it was the outrage of the Aggie fan base, donor base, pretty much everybody that pressured them into backing out of this contract. Mark Stoops, I'm sure once he saw the outrage, I doubt he wanted to be here after that. So it's kudos to Aggie Nation. It's kudos to the people who were hell-bent on getting the guy that they wanted. It's kudos to the program for not going through with it. It's kudos for getting the guy. And Elko was a safe hire, right? I mean, he was always a guy that fit. He was always a guy that we were going to be okay with. And if you're like me, after having his name in our minds for so long as a potential replacement for Jimbo Fisher, once Jimbo was fired and we started looking at the candidates and dreaming about our dream candidate, the name Mike Elko got a little boring, a little sour. And I don't think it's any small factor that the fact that we thought we had Mark Stoops, that made hiring Mike Elko so much more popular and such a relief. Because it was, like I said, one end of the spectrum to the other. We're happy with this. The players are happy with this. Early reports about retention in 2024, keeping this roster together, are very positive. And of course, things are going to unfold. There will be further transfers. Max Johnson announced that he's hitting the portal today. I think that might have happened outside of whoever was going to become the coach because he needs to find opportunity. He's running out of eligibility. Jalen Henderson has shown that he can be a worthy quarterback to Connor Wigman next year. But transfers are still going to happen. Early reports are good. Players are happy. As opposed to when Mark Stoops was announced the head coach, players were not happy. It was outrage amongst the players as well. So this one sits much better in Aggie land. Mike Elko's a great coach. We know that. We know how these defenses performed when he was at the helm of that defense. Many Aggies are happy to have him. So let's keep talking about what went down. Let's talk about Mike Elko. I'm happy about it. Could have been a lot worse. Obviously, we know that at this point. I mean, we know all so well that it could have been an absolute shitstorm. But here we are with Mike Elko. So guys, like and subscribe. I appreciate you guys being here. You guys have been awesome. We hit 1,000 subscribers this month, and I ring dunked live on camera, so I feel like we have a special connection now. I appreciate you guys. So let's get into this. So as we go and as I talk about the hire, as we talk about what happened and what went down and what that means for this program, I want you guys to tell me how you are reacting now that we're several hours away from the situation, how you felt about it, how you feel now, and how you feel ultimately about Mike Elko taking over this thing. I have a feeling most of you guys are going to be at least in wait-and-see mode at worst. There will be a few outliers who are against this hire. It'd be hard for me to find an argument to be totally against it because I think Mike Elko is, first and foremost, an up-and-coming coach. He's 46 years old, and he is just leaving his first head coaching job at Duke. He was a defensive coordinator at Wake Forest for several years, defensive coordinator at Notre Dame for a year before he was defensive coordinator at Texas A&M. And it's kind of funny, Texas A&M opens next season with Notre Dame in Kyle Field, so it'll be a little bit of a weird scenario for Mike Elko playing his former team with his former team, now current team. But Mike Elko, from all reports, a great CEO, a guy that lets coaches coach, a guy that prioritizes development, and a guy that players love. You go down the list of ex-players that have tweeted and talked about Mike Elko, not just during the hiring, but over the years. Whenever Texas A&M came up short, you would see a Jaden Peavy tweet, "I miss Mike Elko," or Buddy Johnson, "I miss Mike Elko." Players now, Bobby Taylor, talking about how happy he is that Mike Elko's here. Torian York, a guy that hasn't even played for him and likely wasn't recruited by him, because Torian York had a late recruiting surge with Texas A&M. Even a guy like him is happy to see a name like Mike Elko. So there's something to Mike Elko that these players love. I'm trying to get a beat on exactly what that is. Could just be a great coach, an approachable coach, things that players like. But I remember specifically players referring to Mike Elko's scheme and the amount of trust they had in his scheme. Now, to what level we're going to see his scheme or to how much he's going to lean on a potential defensive coordinator that he might hire, whether it's Elijah Robinson or someone else, we don't know that. Players love this guy and they love what he does. I think it's an ideal scenario for retention outside of getting the slam dunk name like a Ryan Day, which was always extremely unlikely to happen. You have a guy who is very likely to maintain or retain Elijah Robinson on his staff. I and many others are advocating for Elijah Robinson to become defensive coordinator under Mike Elko for several reasons. First of all, Elijah Robinson's at a point in his career where he has proven that he is ready to make the jump from position coach to a potential coordinator somewhere, whether that's at Texas A&M or somewhere else. Maybe in an ordinary scenario, a guy with the experience level of an Elijah Robinson would maybe need to be a D coordinator at a smaller level program, but I would argue that he's definitely earned it here at Texas A&M, taking over as the interim, being an assistant coach for years, being a co-D coordinator here. I think he's ready to step up here, and I specifically think having Mike Elko at the helm really facilitates that move. Elko can be the kind of guy that guides Elijah Robinson, molds him, just advises him, and allows Elijah to kind of naturally grow into the position. I don't know. Mike Elko's pretty young. I don't see, if this thing works out, Mike Elko leaving anytime soon. So sadly, the days at E-Rob will be at Texas A&M could be numbered because he's an up-and-comer. And if he's not going to be a DC here, I think he will very likely be a DC elsewhere. But I do think that Mike Elko will retain him on the staff in that capacity. I think Mike Elko could be a great mentor for him. They obviously have a relationship from before when Mike Elko was here. And I just think that's a move that makes a lot of sense. Them two together, recruiting, the way players love both of them, Texas A&M could really, really get some names in here with those two leading the recruiting front, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Now, my only worry in terms of retention and in terms of recruiting with a guy like Mike Elko is he's a defensive guy. Elijah Robinson, our best recruiter, is a defensive guy. I don't know what the offensive guys think about a move like this. I don't know if he keeps Bobby Petrino. I don't know if he brings his OC from Duke, who is actually pretty good. He's done some good things at Duke. I don't know where they go offensively, and I don't know how players feel offensively. I don't know how an Evan Stewart feels about getting Mike Elko. I don't know if they have any kind of relationship from before on the recruiting trail. I don't know all that. So I wonder what this does in terms of talent gain and talent retention on the offensive side of the ball. But he has a good track record. And from all reports, Mike Elko is a guy that lets his coordinators do their job. He keeps them accountable. He builds a structure for everybody to perform and do their best work in. And he's a great CEO. As opposed to what Jimbo was before, Jimbo truly was an offensive coach. He was a play caller. He was a coordinator. His strong suit was not being a CEO. And I think that was indicative by his body of work pretty much as a head coach at Texas A&M. From reports that we've gotten from behind the scenes, and to what level of reality those are in, we don't know, but we've heard that Jimbo is maybe not the most organized head coach. He might not be the easiest guy to work with. Stuff like that. We don't know how true that is, but we have heard that Mike Elko is quite the opposite of that kind of a guy, which is good. We needed change. We needed a different mantra. We needed just a different way of going about things. So what can we expect in year one under Mike Elko? What do you guys expect? Do you think that this team could be a 10-plus win team? Because let me remind you, 12-team playoff next year. If you win 10 SEC games, you're probably in the playoff. I think if you retain the players that we think a guy like Mike Elko can retain, that should absolutely be the goal next year. As I've said many times, and as you guys know, 2024 was always a year for Texas A&M to potentially break through, and I don't know what breaking through means. I don't know if that means winning 10-plus games. I don't know if that means winning 9 games in a bowl game. I don't know if that means making the playoff, winning the SEC. It was always poised to be a very successful year for A&M for 2 reasons. First, roster construction. That 2022 class becoming upperclassmen. Guys younger than them growing up. This was when it was all supposed to come together. Second of all, schedule. You don't play Alabama. You don't play Georgia. You play Texas at home, and that's probably your toughest game on the schedule. You get Notre Dame at home. You play Missouri. You play LSU at home. Very favorable schedule. There are absolutely 10 wins on the schedule if you can retain the roster. So that's the big question. Can you retain the roster, as I just talked about before? So I see this team under Mike Elko, knowing what we know now, if you don't have the mass exodus that was on the table, if you got the wrong guy, Mark Stoops, that A&M can actually go out there and be a 10-win contender next year. That's my hope. We'll have to see how things play out. We'll have to see who he hires. We'll have to see how he builds this thing. He has a press conference on Monday, so by the time you're watching this, you may have already seen that. I'm ready for the Mike Elko era. Young up-and-comer, a guy that has great relationships with players, a guy that you're confident to start a pseudo-rebuild with. It's a rebuild in culture. It's a rebuild in attitude. It's a new head coach with a new structure. It's not a rebuild in talent because we know the talent's here. But he's the kind of guy you want to start fresh with, absolutely. Not the splashy name, not the Dan Lanning, not the Ryan Day, but probably the kind of guy that A&M needed. So we will have to reserve our ultimate judgment until several years into this tenure because we're not going to know exactly the direction of this program even after year 1, maybe not even after year 2, and maybe not even after year 3, because that's how these things work. We saw Texas A&M have a good year 1 under Jimbo, a mediocre year 2 under Jimbo, understandably so based on roster, a great year 3, only to fall off a cliff at the end of year 4 and absolutely falling deeper into the abyss in year 5, going 5-7. We're going to know a lot based on retention. Those are going to be the early signs. And then obviously the record in year 1 is going to be an indicator, but we should still reserve judgment for later. Don't get too high or too low. Unless he wins it all, then you just write him a 20-year contract. That'll be all good. I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say about Mike Elko. And by the way, to give you guys further chances to talk about this coaching search and the way things went down over the weekend, I'm going to have a call-in show Monday night, so you're probably watching this on Monday. It'll be at 8 p.m. Central Time tonight, and I'll have another call-in show at our regular time, Wednesday at 8 p.m. So I hope to see some of you guys there. I'm going to open up the phone lines. You guys can call in. I want to hear what you have to say, vent about the situation, vent about what went down with Ross Bjork and the whole Mark Stoops saga. I want to talk about that real quick before I get out of here and talk about a couple other things that have come up over the weekend. What the hell happened? What the hell happened with Mark Stoops and that whole situation? We're not going to know until the documentary comes out. That's what I'm convinced of. We're not going to get the exact details of what happened. By the time you're watching this, has Ross Bjork been fired? This was a really bad look. And it makes me feel really stupid for defending Ross Bjork over the last few weeks. I like the guy. I like what he had to say when Jimbo got fired. He has had great hires in basketball and in baseball. He seems like a great ambassador for the university. Seems like a guy that forms good relationships. He looks the part. He says the right things. This was an awful, awful look for Texas A&M, and we're so fortunate that we were able to clean it up by making a solid hire. It is such a bad look to have a guy all but locked in and hired, to face the backlash that you did, and then to back out of the contract. Why even put yourself in that situation to begin with? Mark Stoops was obviously, they must have known somewhat. They must have had an inkling that this would have been the reaction to Mark Stoops. And I actually wasn't one of the guys that was outraged, because I had already decided well before the hire that whoever it was, I was going to give them a chance, give them, like I just said, I went on the spiel about we won't know for 2 or 3 years. I was going to kind of give it that mindset, even if I wasn't super high on the guy. I happen to be high on Mike Elko, but I'm still going to give it a few years to give my final judgment unless things are just crazy good or crazy bad initially. I was going to do that with Mark Stoops anyways, but they had to know what the majority of people would have felt with a name like that. A name that's been out there, a guy that's older, a guy that's body of work has been established. And I had said in some of these previous videos that if you were going to go for a guy like that, you had to get the best of the best. You needed to get the Ryan Day. He's not even super established, but he does have a good short body of work. You need to get like a Jim Harbaugh or some miracle name. That's not what Mark Stoops was. So it just looks bad. I mean, it doesn't matter that we're the laughing stock, but if people were pointing and laughing before, they're pointing and laughing even harder now. And the only thing that's going to fix that is winning. Just astonishing. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I was up all night on my phone because it was such an insane storyline. Insane. The updates we were getting. It was like we got the announcement in the morning. Then he got hired. Then we started hearing the outrage. Then the rumblings that it's not set in stone. Then that it didn't happen. And then Mark Stoops himself tweets that Kentucky's my home, I'm staying. And then the Billy Lucci to be continued into the morning. You go back to like the no-brainer baseline hire of Mike Elko. Just ridiculous. Give me your thoughts on that. I'm floored by it. I'll talk more about it as more info comes out. I don't know how much info we'll get. Like I said, we're going to be waiting 20 years for the documentary, and then we'll know. Just a crazy turn of events. So what happens to Ross Bjork? Give me your thoughts on the whole situation. Just stunning. So guys, that's the video for tonight. Like I said, I'll be back Monday night, 8 p.m. with the call-in show. Another call-in show at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. I'm going to keep doing these shows throughout the off-season. Last off-season, I kind of did maybe 1 or 2 videos a month. We're going to do stuff weekly throughout this off-season cycle, but we're going to keep it as consistent as absolutely possible, and I really want to keep the live show going throughout the duration of the off-season. So mark your calendars, Wednesday at 8 p.m. That's going to be the show time throughout the year. Guys, like and subscribe. Like I said, I appreciate you guys. We hit 1,000 subs. We're growing like crazy. I appreciate you guys commenting and giving me insight. I always say I learn more from the comment section on this channel than I do from articles about this team and insiders talking about this team. You guys provide great insight and great perspective. I appreciate you guys for doing that. But I'll see you Monday night. Appreciate you all. Thanks, and gig 'em.